Welcome to Calm Your Grits podcast. I'm your host, Joei Allen. I'm just your average stay-at-home mom, homeschool mom, and wifey who loves all things sparkly and anything DIY. From party planning to interior design, basically just a crazy Pinterest mom. I'm a self-proclaimed expert at nothing other than hanging on by a thread. I am living my best life during what I can only describe as my midlife crisis. This podcast is about nothing and everything. So whether you're here because you could relate or for some comic relief, my hope is that you'll walk away learning something new or at least feel a little less weird about the voices in your head and the decisions you've made in your life. I'm thrilled to have my dear friend Laura joining us today. She's a mom, a warrior, and a beacon of hope for anyone who's faced the stormy seas of postpartum depression. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Laura, could you please share a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm so happy to be here, Joey. So proud of you and so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am a mom of three, a business owner, married to a business owner, a fitness enthusiast, lover of people, a foodie, a bookworm. Um, love my family dearly, love my dogs, and just an old lady still getting after it. every
Oh, old lady, come
you
on.
know what I mean. Um, that is me. I would definitely identify as a wife and a mom and a business owner, and not quite an old washed up athlete. Um, big believer and on a constant mission for humanity and lifting each other up.
Amen. I mean, that's so true. I think people will realize how true that is if they don't know you already.
That's
You're
sweet.
kind you're a big deal here in Fort Mill, right?
I don't know.
Okay, so we've been friends since 2011 till 2012. We initially met at a run, I think. And again, it's a little blurry
Oh, I remember.
thinking. Yeah. I remember just walking out there 17,000 months pregnant, but I remember meeting you. Uh, I, I think we ran into each other at a grocery store either before or after that, but it was just like these random, like, just obviously in hindsight, I realized God works in mysterious ways,
Right.
but, um, and then I recognized you from church. But one of the biggest moments that stands out for me at the beginning of our relationship was my church squad being like, all right, we're going to go and volunteer in the baby room.
Mhm.
And I was like, all right, I guess we're going to volunteer in the baby room. And I was pregnant at this point. And it just so happens that you were the leader of that group.
Mhm.
Of all the groups, out of all the services, out of this group, you happen to be the leader of. And I I think it was my very first day. You just kind of came in. You're so happy, so cheery, and kind of gave me your baby. And I was like, oh, I got it. And he was like, the cutest thing, Cam. Oh, he was perfect. And one of the things I remember every time I ran into you or saw you is you were just full of energy, so happy and just always loving on people and just being one of the kindest people I've ever met.
Thanks.
But I didn't know that you were battling postpartum depression because you just don't know what it actually
Mhm.
looked like until you go through it. But could you share a little bit about your experience with postpartum depression and what were the initial signs or feelings that you noticed?
Sure. Now I have to go way back. Okay. This is
Let's
taking me
go.
back. My oldest being almost 21 years old and the baby that you held being almost 13. It's crazy. It makes me sad. But um I had battled with anxiety and depression in my early 20s. So I was not new to it. And from everything that I had learned about myself and those sort of things, I kind of was that a textbook cookie cutter version of a young woman who might experience something like that. I got through it, learned a lot about myself, and later on in life, obviously, got married, got pregnant, thought I had really put that behind me, or at least had the tools. And I remember towards the end of my first pregnancy starting to feel some of those feelings creep up again. But it was my first child. I what There was a lot of different things going on with my body and in my life, and so some of that was normal. Um, but I did experience it shortly after my first child was born, and the feelings that I experienced were very similar to the anxiety and depression that I had experienced earlier in life. The difference being that they felt tenfold, as well as I had a human to take care of. So it made it that much scarier. And it also seemed to happen very quickly for me. I know that's not
Did,
everybody's experience.
did you know that that's what it was,
No,
or do you
nope.
just remember feeling it?
Well, I did not know. It was not something that anybody, the female people that had had children before me, that anybody in my family had experienced up to that point. So it wasn't something that was discussed or thought about. Um, there was some concern with my OBGYN to watch out for some fluctuations, but again, I had I hadn't experienced anything traumatic throughout my pregnancy, and it had been over 5 years prior since I had dealt with anything, so it was not on my radar.
Okay, so your first pregnancy, you didn't get any actual kind of treatment for postpartum
Mhm.
depression or anything, right?
I did.
Oh, you did. Okay.
I After realizing that something was not right, and family members concerned, I did visit the emergency room where, they ruled out any physical issues. And I had some postpartum physical things going on, but nothing that would constitute anything that I was going through emotionally. So, with that, I was referred back to a therapist and some outside counseling and treatments. But that was, almost 21 years ago. I was in Las Vegas at that point. So, the mental health capacity for postpartum depression or any kind of postpartum mental health care was not extravagant.
Right. Like nowadays, I feel like if you know what to look for, there's a lot more
Correct.
resources out there.
Correct.
Okay. So when you had your second, because you have three kids, right?
Correct.
What are their ages again?
20, 14, and 12. Like, I
Okay.
know. Uh,
So your second pregnancy, were you on any kind of different, I don't know, treatment or anything? Or did they just think like, okay, the first time around was just for whatever reason and you should be fine this time around?
That's a really great question, and one that I actually thought about even prior to speaking with you today. Um, my second pregnancy was over 6 years later. I'm in a different place. I'm now in Charlotte, North Carolina, relocated from Las Vegas. And after communicating with my physicians and my therapists and my OB and different things, they really felt that there was a biological component to and slash hormonal component to my postpartum. I was, and this is, please know, this is no judgment. I don't care how you have a baby or where or whatever,
Mm.
but
No judgment
and
here.
I'm
Zero.
I'm just explaining my personal story. My first delivery was medicated. I did not have a cesarean, but it was medicated. It was long. I got the epidural and all the bells and whistles and the fun things that go along with that,
Big-
to ensure a comfortable delivery. And so one of the thoughts was because of my extreme reaction after that, some homework we did was because of the level of different medications. And I don't do real well on some of those, especially if they're hormonal based. Maybe that could have been some sort of issue. And I did have a harder recovery, and there were just some different physical things that I was battling due to some medical intervention, which I chose the first time. So I just decided the second time there just wouldn't be any drugs and no medical intervention. All things, all things considered, right? I thought, let me prepare a different way. And perhaps it's been 6 years and I'm in a healthy place mentally and physically. Let's let's see if I get a different outcome. If all things line up effectively. I had a great pregnancy. I had an outstanding delivery. It sucked, but I did everything was healthy and all the boxes checked and no medical intervention. I was still in the hospital. I physically was so great afterwards and had a healthy baby. So all the preventative, what I thought at the time, and boxes were checked, and I still experienced postpartum depression even more severely. Actually, this second time.
Was that the worst one out of all three?
Yes.
Okay. And so, what steps did you take to seek help, and what resources were most helpful to you?
Um, I have and still have, even though he's retired because we're all getting older, an extremely close relationship with my OBGYN who he is just the best man ever, absolutely amazing. So he was my first point of contact because he knew me, the situation, all of the things so well. I did some treatment outpatient, found my first therapist in Charlotte, got some bad advice, got some good advice. It escalated and I did end up hospitalized, but it was that extreme that I did end up hospitalized. Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about your support. Did you have a good support system, or did you feel like there was a lot of, I can't say anything? Like, because I know, like, during that time, we're so in our heads
Yes.
with stuff.
I had a great support system in my husband and my local family members around me. What I was missing that I didn't have the first time that was instrumental was my mom. I know that sounds so funny, but I do believe it takes a village. I had another child at home. My husband owns his own business and had patients of his own to see. There were just many moving parts. My doctor was a great support, but I didn't have that consistent day by day support that I had living in Las Vegas. My mother was still in Las Vegas. So it took some time. People did support me, but this was really something that I needed to get through, Joey, and figure out in a different location and realize that I could try to change the circumstances, but I really needed to dig in. Again, my faith is strong. I believe God put me exactly where I needed to be. And there was a wonderful doctor while I was inpatient who specialized in postpartum depression, which now we're talking 14, almost 15 years ago, was still not prevalent and still not completely discussed. So I was kind of going in uncharted territory with her, but she was the expert in her field at the time. And I had such a drive and a fight to get better. And it was not my first rodeo that I was willing to advocate for myself and do whatever I needed to do to get back to who I was. And she was instrumental in that, both inpatient and outpatient.
I also know that we block a lot of it out,
Yes.
but that you remember. Are there any specific like coping mechanisms or strategies that you found effective in like helping you manage it?
Yes. Just to know that I had people on my team was really important. And that outside of stepping back into mom and wife life and having to multitask and take care of myself, there were resources. One of those was the Prenatal and Postpartum Center of the Carolinas, which was a new and up and coming resource, which was so warranted and so wonderful. Something that I later was able to pass on to others, right? Because I'm not a doctor, I can go through something, but like anything else, whether it's our faith or any kind of recovery, you need a resource to share with others. So that was wonderful. And through that, I went back to the resources that I knew that helped me in every stage of trauma or crisis in my life, whatever I was dealing, whether they were mini or major or whatever. What did Laura do? And those were sleep. Um,
Which any mom is like,
And I know
"Well,
we always
yeah, oh yeah.
say, but I needed to sleep, so that looked like somebody else caring for the baby or me being able to check out for a few hours to do that effectively.
Which I feel like is a little bit not easier, but once you realize that this is postpartum depression and sleep is something that's going to help you, I feel like you, or at least how it was with me, more people were willing to step in to help to make sure that I was able to get, even if it's 20 more minutes of sleep. So, I mean,
100%. 100%. I knew enough about myself at this point that if I wasn't gonna be okay, none of the rest of the machine was gonna work that looked like the Hargraves family or my other children or my husband or his business or my work or whatever that looked like. So, it was a form of self-care. So, in addition to that, exercise and movement is a very big therapeutic for me. It's paramount to my self-care. So, I incorporated that. Not full-blown craziness, but my 1 hour that I give myself still to this day at whatever physical level I'm at that I do. Um, I looked at caffeine levels. I looked at what I was consuming. I looked at counseling, whether I couldn't physically be in an office. At that time, it wasn't very well known, but if it was something that I could do online, any kind of a support group that I had, I didn't isolate. I made sure that I communicated my feelings with others. And if there was medication involved at whatever level, I was really diligent with that. And I gave myself some grace. I realized I can't do this alone and I need to follow steps of what I'm being told. And it's okay. It's okay that I'm not superwoman. And at the end, as you know, I came full circle and I was able to be a testimony to others, which to me, Joey, felt so much like knowledge is power, just to know this is what it is. It's okay. You can come through it and here are some steps.
I couldn't agree with you more. So, this is a big one. Breaking the stigma, right? Postpartum depression. I feel like people have their own opinions about it until they're in it or someone close to them deals with something. So, back with your first pregnancy, back in the day, h- how did how did you manage society's expectations and judgments while you were dealing with postpartum depression?
It was difficult then because I put the pressures of new motherhood on myself. And I also had family members that hadn't ever experienced it. I didn't have anybody in my immediate circle of trust that could relate. So that brought on feelings of guilt.
Oh my goodness.
You know,
Oh my
what's
god.
wrong with me? Nobody could understand. Well, in my circle. I believe that part of that strength came because I had dealt with mental health issues before. So it wasn't a double whammy, meaning the stigma of mental health issues to begin with, and then layer on the postpartum and the new motherhood. So I was disappointed that it was occurring. It was my first pregnancy. So my circle of friends were either new mothers themselves or hadn't had children yet. So I didn't want to come out and say, "Hey, are you dealing with this?" Or, you know, or
Mhm.
frighten somebody that hadn't had children yet or were pregnant. So it was difficult then. But I eventually, when there was no other way but up, I gained the confidence to be okay with where I was, proud of my recovery in that, and so happy, Joey, that I was on the other side that I didn't mind sharing. But that was just my case. And because people could see that I was thriving and doing well, I think it made it easier to share because the proof was there.
Again, one of the biggest things is like you hear postpartum depression and you assume, I just feel like there's this misconception about it. And it's unfortunate because like now I know that 1 in 5 moms deal with it.
Absolutely.
I also do think that it is up to us. I know a lot of times we're like, oh, we're not professionals, we're not this, we're not that. But like you mentioned before, the profession don't necessarily know what's going on or how to fix it. So I do think that, like you did, sharing your story and just being open about it is what we need to do
Correct.
for each other.
Correct.
You know, like it takes a village.
It
I
absolutely
was wondered, I was like, is there a button where the village just shows up? Or so advice for the village. How can other people help a mom or a family member that might be experiencing postpartum depression?
I always advocate to your professional provider, whoever that is. You need to rule out that there's not anything going on physically.
Right.
That's secondly, there are so many resources, national mental health organizations. I don't know if the prenatal and postpartum,
It's not.
it's not.
There's a different organization now.
Okay.
It's PSI. It's the one I'm actually leading online support groups and stuff like that.
Okay. So maybe
But
because I'm a little bit more out of the loop, you can speak more on that. But any kind of free, local, community based support, professional help. I am such a huge advocate of professional counseling. Um, I believe that it is an important part of healthcare and your self care. I know sometimes it's a difficult financial pill to swallow, but postpartum depression can't be just generalized. Every woman is different and that you need individualized support.
if there was like one thing that could be changed, what could be done to help new moms be more aware of?
I believe for new moms being that are seeing the care of a physician or a midwife or any other kind of postpartum care where their child is involved. And I know the pediatricians and the OBGYNs do this to a point, but I feel there should be a third party involved, more of a mental health based professional, not just the MD in that screening, whether it's an in home visit from a midwife or a doula or whoever delivered the baby, whatever that looks like. I believe that there should be a routine mental health screen that is done with a series of individual questions, behaviors, assessments, whatever that looks like, done by a professional.
I definitely agree with that. The one thing is like, I remember being afraid to speak up that something was off because I was like at the pediatrician because I was like, are they going to take my baby?
So
There's
do you
got to be
so
something.
maybe some of those questions and some of those guidelines are put into that, and that's what the professionals need to know how to do. I remember
Yeah.
in it the pieces are there in our medical system. It's there. I remember going to the emergency room before I went inpatient after my second, And the first thing they did in triage was take me alone and make sure that there was nothing happening to me physically at home. And they reassured me at that time that there wouldn't be any repercussions for my honesty. If
Right.
they can do those same streamlined questions in a postpartum interview where the reassurance is there, the comfort level is there, and they're professional enough to maybe they can read the signs outside of how you answer the questions, Joey. This is not our mom's nervous breakdown as it was in the 60s or 70s or 80s. I don't have the exact numbers, but we are in a culture where it does happen. And there's enough information, there's enough research, Joey, that we need to move forward with it.
You and I have the similar things that we had dealt with in anxiety, and like we thought we knew all about mental health. That we weren't against that necessarily. Like, yeah, did we want to take medication? No. And all the things, but we still didn't know what it was. Like, had it not been for Allison and you literally like making the appointment for me to go, I probably would have gotten no flight, Yeah.
Correct. Yes. The biggest thing for me going through it, and other than the normal recovery after just delivering a human being into the world, was these are not normal behaviors for me. The anxiety and depression times 10, the insomnia, the racing thoughts, or the intrusive thoughts, the what if thinking, the worry. They were so not who I was prior to going through postpartum depression. And while I recognized some of it was new territory, for the majority, I was like, this isn't normal. The length of time that it was happening, and there was no getting better, or the next day would be better, or the next week would be better. So it was a continuous pattern as well that I think people should recognize, where there's no healing or improvement. That's where there is no textbook. Not everybody wants to self-harm. Not everybody wants to harm their baby. Some people just want to run away and forget that any of it ever happened. Some people are concerned and hyper vigilant about something happening. So you don't compare yourself to someone else, whether it's good or bad. Whether you say, oh, I'm not as crazy as her, I'm not doing that, so maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Or the other way of, I'm way crazier than her, I'm doing this, so I must really be bad. It could go either way. It's the point of initiating a conversation.
Yeah.
And realizing you don't have to go through it alone.
And that is like the biggest thing. And it's like community, like just because your experience was different than mine.
Absolutely.
But you knew enough to recognize that it could be this. Let's get her some help. My friends none of them were moms.
Correct.
They didn't really know, but they knew a little bit of your story.
Correct.
And how that they reached out to you because they're like, okay, we know that she's gone through this. And they were also, I think, like pulling straws on who was going to break it to me that I had to go see a therapist. But I mean, that was for me, for my personality, that's what helped.
Yeah.
Someone had just been like, hey, it's this, and dropped it on me, probably would have made me crazier. Like everyone's different. And the whole thing is like community. Just like we help with a meal, just like we do this, maybe a link, hey, who knows? I don't know the answer. All I know is one of the things that helped me was hearing your story, relating so much to you, especially like during my recovery, is realizing that, you're a normal person just like me. Like,
that's right.
If that makes any sense. So it has to be someone, because like I wouldn't listen to just anybody. I don't think.
The reason I felt that volunteering in the baby room was so important, I was able to be with my baby, my littlest one. So that was nice to be with him and all the babies. But it really gave me an opportunity to serve other women so they could have that hour to worship, to hear a message, to have a little date with their significant other, in church, whatever that
Yeah.
was like, and know that their baby was well taken care of by somebody who has been there, done that. If that was what they were going through, but whatever, it didn't matter. Even if they weren't, that was where I was able to serve and heal at the same time. But that was part of me giving back to that little level of self-care that I could to other women as well. I just happened to meet you at one of the most crucial times in your life. So that, that was really cool that I was able to impact you.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing your incredible, amazing, inspiring journey with us.
And for our listeners, remember that you are not alone, whether you are battling postpartum depression or any other challenge. There's a community out there ready to support you. And that brings us to the end of this episode. I'd love it if you would share, subscribe, and follow me on all the social media thingies. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to keep those grits calm. Until next time, bye.